So now that we've begun working with the BRFIS dataset, you might take a look at what your screen shows you and you might say, what are all these dots? Focusing particularly on the SX orient or sexual orientation variable and the add sleep variable. Remember, you can only see maybe 20 or 40 of the rows in this data set, but there are 441,000 rows. So you can see here in the left-sided row menu that there's more than 441,000 rows. And in fact, if you start scrolling down, you get almost 200,000 rows in before you start seeing values for add sleep. Now, of course, this is a relatively small data set, but in large data sets, you can't just scroll down and find things to see what values there are. So whenever you open data, so you'll go into your Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System or BRFIS codebook. And if you go to Edit and Find, you can type in ADSLEEP, that's the name of the variable, and it will come up here on page 96. And you can see here that the question is, over the last 2 weeks, how many days have you had trouble falling asleep or staying asleep or sleeping too much? And there are 5 categories here of answers. 1 through 14 is in days of the last 2 weeks, so it's 1 to 2 weeks, or none is coded as 88. And of course, none would be 0 days. 77 is coded as don't know, 99 is coded as refused, and blank is not asked or missing. And you can see here there are 421,037 missing responses. And that's why when you look at the most of the add sleep, you see these dots. So don't automatically assume just because the first 20 rows are missing that all of the rows are missing. So let's go ahead and do a distribution on add sleep. And remember, because all of the responses are coded as numbers, JMP is going to think this is numeric, but it's not. Remember, the possible answers are out of the last 14 days. So 0 through 14 are real answers. Everything else is refused or don't know or missing. And because it's coded as numeric right now, the missing is considered this dot. That's how JMP shows you a missing numeric variable. But we need it to be categorical. And so we can see here a lot of our 10,788 have zeros. Those are our 88s. And if we take a look at the remainder of the 99s, which are the refused, it'll show us here there's 58. And if we go back here, we can see that there's 58. We could click on the 77s and so forth. But what we really need is to have this as a real numeric variable with the number of days. So we're going to recode. So I have add sleep selected. I'm going to the columns menu. I'm going to recode, and it's going to bring up the recoded window. So again, I want a formula column, so it will save how I did it. I don't want to name it add sleep 2. I want to name it something useful. So I'm going to go sleep days 14. This dot is my missing, so I can just leave it a dot. I don't need to do anything with it as a numeric variable. If I make it a space, if you make it a space, it's going to treat it categorical, so you can just leave it as the dot. All I need to do is recode the 77, which if I look back at my code book is don't know, not sure. So make that a dot to make it missing. My 88s, remember, are zeros. That's none of the last 14 days, so I need to make that a 0. And then my 99s are refused, and again, that's missing. So I'm going to put a dot here. So this now looks like everything. My missings, my 77s, and my 99s are going to stay missing. My nones are now 0, and I have my 1 through 14 days as numeric. And I am going to say recode. So you can see here, I now have sleep days and add sleep. And again, it's still showing as all missing. I need to check that it worked. So I'm going to go to the tables menu, do a summary. Both of my variables are already selected, and I will put them in the group, and I'll press OK. And it will come up and show me that my missings are still missing. My 77s, which were the don't knows, those are now missing. My 99s are my refused. Those are now missing. My 88s are my none, which are now 0. And there are 10,788 of those, so I've got that correct. And then all the rest of my values stayed the same. So I can close this out. And I can go back here now and do a distribution on the number of days of sleep. So analyze distribution, put that in the Y column and press OK. And then you'll see here we get a much better, more evenly distributed number of responses here. Nothing very tall in 99s and 88s. And we can see now that all of our zeros are showing. And in fact, with our median here at 0, we know that at least 50% of our responses are zeros. At least 50% of our responses are 0. We have 20,105 responses to this question. So that's something you'd want to report, that only 20,105 people answered this question. Of those that responded, the mean times that they had trouble sleeping in the past 14 days was 3.6 days with a standard deviation of 5.2. Because this is very skewed, and I will go up here and I will change my histogram to show horizontal. And again, play around in the red arrows, histogram options, and I removed the vertical. You can see here that this is not a symmetric distribution. This is a strong unimodal, but an argument can be made for bimodal distribution, unimodal or bimodal distribution, because we have two modes here. So here and there. And you can see that the median is probably the most appropriate response for the center of this data. And then in this case, you'd want to probably give both the interquartile range with 0 to 5 being the bulk, or 50% of the middle part of the data ranges from 0 to 5. And of course here we know that the minimum is going to be 0 and the max is 14. That's the way the question is worded. In this case, I would report the median with an interquartile range of 0 to 5. And that is how you recode add sleep.